Taiwan's military spots more than 20 Chinese warplanes near the country. Beijing's man in Westminster, an alleged spy for China in the heart of Britain's democracy sparks concern.
What trends will dominate business through to 2035? Industry leaders have gathered in Taipei to answer that very question.
Plus, scholars warn climate change could bring more disease to Taiwan. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Taiwan's military says that a record 20 Chinese warships were spotted operating around the island in a span of 24 hours on Tuesday. That comes just a day after a Chinese aircraft carrier group passed Taiwan on its way to conduct exercises in the Yellow and East China Seas. They were spotted 60 nautical miles southeast of the country's southernmost point. The Shandong is China's second aircraft carrier and the first to be built domestically. It took part in Chinese military drills around Taiwan in April and also sailed through the Taiwan Strait in June. The frequent passage of Chinese ships near Taiwan is putting more pressure on the country's ability to defend itself, but it's still waiting on the delivery of US weapons worth over $20 billion. For more on the delays and their impact, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Cato Institute defense analyst Jordan Cohen.
Taiwan's military is reporting that the Chinese aircraft carrier, the Shandong, is sailing upwards to conduct military exercises. Seeing how China is increasing this sort of military activity, what can Taiwan do to boost its defense capabilities to counter this kind of threat?
I think part of it comes down to is that for so long, Taiwan was looking for big ticket items, right? Things like big fighter aircrafts and tanks that signal to China, right, U.S. commitment, but they don't necessarily do much. No matter how many tanks you have, that's not going to stop Chinese kind of excursions and Chinese carriers. And so a big thing for Taiwan is going to be, and to be fair, it is doing this currently, shifting to more asymmetric capabilities, asking for things like harpoon missiles, right, like better radar that would allow them to fight off those kind of excursions, especially in the case of if a war breaks out, being able to stop invasions before they hit land is really important.
There's currently over $20 billion in U.S. defense equipment and weapons that still have not been delivered to Taiwan because of supply chain issues and influences from the pandemic. But what can Taiwan do in the meantime to try to resolve this backlog?
Taiwan's in a little bit of a pickle because when it comes to things like producing its own weapons on Taiwanese soil, I think that would be great. I think that's a great first step. But when it comes to something like co-production, there's weariness within DC because of fears of spies from China or other countries in Taiwan. But I do think production in Taiwan is a good start. And my personal opinion is for the US, things like co-production in Taiwan could be very useful. When it comes to looking at other countries, again, it's going to be hard for Taiwan to find a supplier because a lot of countries are worried about China.
There is a debate and a narrative in Washington about the trade-off between giving weapons to Taiwan and giving weapons to Ukraine because there might be some overlap in the weapons that are given to two countries. How big is that overlap, and is that a cause for concern for Taiwan?
I think a big part of what's happening with the discussions in DC are this kind of what I view as a false choice between having to choose between Ukraine and Taiwan. And while I have written and I have some personal fears about the weapons that the U.S. is sending to Ukraine, up until about a month ago, these weapons were not coming from the same stockpiles. Taiwan was looking to buy weapons and buy new, in this case, new weapons. And Ukraine was getting mainly excess defense stocks. Now, in the U.S., the National Defense Authorization Act from last year does, for the first time, authorize Taiwan to receive weapons through these U.S. defense stocks through what's known as Presidential Drawdown Authority. So there definitely is overlap. What I would say is Taiwan has bigger fears from other U.S. clients than Ukraine.
That was Cato Institute defense analyst Jordan Cohen speaking to our reporter Jaime Ocon. At a time when Taiwan is seeking to boost its defensive capabilities, the military will see the number of enlisted personnel drop by over 5,000 for 2024. Jaime Ocon has more.
Taiwan is boosting its combat readiness. Faced with an increasingly aggressive China, Taiwan is getting ready to extend its conscription from 4 months of military service to 1 year. It's part of efforts to improve the country's defensive capabilities. Taiwan's active armed forces have also grown from around 169,000 in 2020 to over 171,000 in 2023. But that could soon change, as next year's defense budget is predicting a drop of over 5,000 enlisted personnel, putting that number at just about 166,000. 99% of those leaving the military are non-commissioned officers. So at a time when Taiwan is seeking to bolster its fighting powers, why is it losing so many from its ranks?
所以在这种情况之下，国防部就从人力资源的考量，就把部分的志愿役的名额给减少。那第二个是由于这个少子化的影响，所以从民主国家，包括美国还有日本的自卫队来看，他们在招募志愿役士兵的时候，都会遇到比较多的挑战。
Taiwan began moving towards an all-voluntary military in the early 2000s, when the country was enjoying a period of general stability and peace. Conscription was reduced from 2 years to 1 in 2008, and then again to 4 months when cross-strait relations improved. But as relations with Beijing soured, Taipei has decided to ramp up compulsory military service once more. It may be a tough task to get the new personnel up to speed, but some experts believe conscripts can still add to Taiwan's overall combat readiness.
同时，即使明年开始有更多的现代装备加入国军的行列，可是这些装备跟战车一样，都还是有一些就是比较容易训练的这个职务，像是一些飞弹卡车的驾驶，也是比较容易用义务役来这个就发挥它的效果的。
Some also reject the idea that the change in policy reflects a failure of the government's efforts to recruit career military personnel.
我想这可能会变成那个5比5的一个比例。我们可以算，刚才有算过，就是未来台湾1年会有75000个男生，就是平均的出生率。那从台湾的国军的规模，未来可能会扩增到27万人左右。
Taiwan set a goal 20 years ago to have an all-volunteer professional military. But for now, the country will continue to rely heavily on its conscripts. John Su, Sam Hui, and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
A man accused of spying for China in the UK's top legislative body says he's innocent. He was one of 2 men arrested under espionage charges in March in what's been called Parliament's biggest breach of security involving a hostile state. Sally Jensen has more.
Britain and China's relationship was showing signs of improvement just days ago. China's Premier Li Qiang spoke with the UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak about mutual respect on the sidelines of the G20 summit in India's capital, New Delhi. But that mutual respect is now on the rocks, as a man has been accused of being a spy for China in the British Parliament. He's one of 2 people UK police arrested in March for alleged espionage-related offences. A local paper reported one of the men was a parliamentary researcher with strong ties to Beijing. The accused, who's in his 20s, said he was innocent in a statement delivered by his lawyers. He says, "I feel forced to respond to the media accusations that I am a Chinese spy. It is wrong that I should be obliged to make any form of public comment on the misreporting that has taken place." The researcher, who has been named by some British media, had access to China-skeptic politicians and classified information. Prime Minister Sunak responded,
"The whole House is rightly appalled about reports of espionage in this building. The sanctity of this place must be protected."
Beijing has denied the allegation, calling it, quote, malicious slander. Some British politicians believe access to China's huge market transcends questions of state security, calling for better diplomacy between the 2 countries.
I think, first of all, there's only so much one can say when it comes to matters of security. But we cannot describe China as foes. They are our 4th largest trading partner.
Britain's security services have long warned politicians about the threat Beijing poses to Parliament. Government ministers insist the scandal will not change London's approach to China, which Sunak sees as engaging with it while being able to raise points of disagreement. But activists say Britain's handlings with Beijing should focus heavily on China's human rights abuses.
If they're targeting an activist like me in London, you can imagine how much worse it is for Hong Kongers and Uyghurs and Tibetans and Chinese students in the UK who are opposed to the CCP.
The two suspects have been released on bail until October. But whatever the outcome of the investigation, the goal of mutual respect between the UK and China has been dealt a huge blow. Chris Ma and Sally Jensen for TaiwanPlus.
Nobel laureate Maria Ressa has been acquitted of her final tax fraud charge in the Philippines. She and Rappler, the news organization she co-founded, were indicted for tax evasion in 2018. The cases were brought during the government of then Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte, who Ressa has been a fierce critic of. Ressa and Rappler were cleared of 4 other tax-related charges in January. However, Ressa was found guilty in 2020 of cyber libel and is out on bail. Following the verdict, she said the latest acquittal is a victory for press freedom, but that more challenges lie ahead.
Both journalism and democracy is under attack globally. The cameras that are here are threatened by information operations on social media, right? We've seen this not just in the Philippines, but all around the world.
An expert caver from the US is safe after a harrowing 10-day rescue mission to remove him from a cave in southern Turkey. Mark Dickey was exploring the cave in the Taurus Mountains as part of a research group. He was 1,000 meters underground when he fell sick on September 2nd. Medics and rescuers from 8 countries worked together to pull him out early Tuesday morning. During the rescue, Dickey suffered gastrointestinal bleeding that was severe enough to require a blood transfusion.
At one point in time, while I was waiting for Jessica to get back down with fluids, she made an insane climb of 1,000 meters out of a cave to come back down another 1,000 meters, along with the support of Hungarians and Turkish cavers. Saved my life.
79 members of Ukraine's National Symphony Orchestra are on a performance tour of Taiwan. To get here, they spent 3 days taking a bus across Ukraine, catching a flight from Vienna. The orchestra performed the classic Taiwanese tune Bang Shun Hong in Taiwan's southern city of Kaohsiung. The musicians were forced to pause their usual performances back home due to the war in Ukraine. 2 members had just finished serving on the battlefield. They've stepped back from active service and re-entered the concert hall to showcase Ukrainian resilience.
Under 60 years, they can go to the war. But Ministry of Culture, they make special permit for them to be performers, because it's more important now.
Students from a local university have successfully launched a rocket. Eric Gao takes a look.
3, 2, 1.
Pingdong, we have liftoff. Here at the Southern County's rocket launch site, students from Tamkang University have fired off a single-stage rocket of their own design. Called Jessie, the rocket reached an altitude of 4.2 kilometers. It's the school's second launch since June, and they've made some improvements.
并没有制作副台的建设，那整个火箭是比较重。那我们这一次就全部改成全副台，都是采用国内厂商的产品，让我们火箭的技术可以让它本土化。
Jessie's launch was done with the help of Taiwan's National Space Organization. They've been developing Taiwan's aerospace talent for a long time and have completed 4 successful student rocket launches so far. It's all part of a push to get the local aerospace sector off the ground. Andy Xue and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
Now, how does being paid to have fun sound? Applications to become an international ambassador for theme parks are now officially open. The Tourism Bureau will select 50 foreign residents to boost tourism at amusement parks around the country through their social media. It comes as the parks struggle with a drop in visitors after the COVID-19 pandemic.
香港有迪士尼，它一个乐园可能一年就有超过1000万人次。但是如果是说有朋友已经在台湾的，那透过他们去发布消息，然后邀请他们来，是还算可以尝试一下。
The most successful influencers will take home more than $900 US. Coming up after the break, a campaign to save Taiwan's native fish from invasive species. Stay tuned.
For more stories about animals in Taiwan, follow TaiwanPlus on Facebook and Twitter or download the TaiwanPlus app.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Taiwan's leading tech research and development institute hosted a business forum in Taipei on Tuesday. Leslie Liao was there to see what business leaders think will be the big tech developments of the future.
What trends will dominate in tech business through to 2035? That's what industry leaders have gathered to discuss in Taipei. The Industrial Technology Research Institute, or ITRI, held an international business forum this week, inviting speakers from leading names in tech, biomedicine, and energy to reveal what they think the future of business will look like.
我们也希望借由他们的一些看法，对于将来的我们所谓的 future scenario， 将来的情境呢，能更准确的去掌握。
Sustainability, AI, and semiconductors are currently at the forefront of business in Taiwan. But the forum also looks ahead to trends through to 2035. So what kind of game changers are likely to arise between now and then?
One of the things we've not talked about is the role that quantum will play, in particular in things like health, where it will be able to find new and more efficient drugs.
Then there's also talk about a technological convergence. That's where unrelated industries become increasingly integrated as they advance. Take smartphones as an example. They're not just phones, but also computers, cameras, and payment tools.
In the future, I will foresee the technology convergence will be the key trend in the next 10 years. And then based upon this, I think digitalization by utilizing all the digital tools will be extremely important.
But even with all this speculation, the panelists harbored no illusions about the speedy and unpredictable nature of technological advancement.
我们所布建的不是一个科技的发展，而是在那个领域应用领域里面我们所需要达到的一个目的。So that's why we don't do particular technology roadmap. We do the domain application roadmap.
These days, new technologies are popping up rapidly, whether it's AI, biomedicine, green energy, or semiconductors. Exciting new things are happening every day. And it's easy to get overwhelmed with things like an AI fish tank, but hopefully today's forum shines a light on what the next big things are. Devin Tsai and Leslie Liao in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
At least 2,000 people are believed dead as devastating floods tear through Libya during Mediterranean storm Daniel. Authorities say thousands more are missing in the North African nation after whole neighborhoods were swept into the sea amid heavy rain and the burst of 2 dams. The Libyan Presidential Council is calling for urgent international help as the now inaccessible city of Derna, along with 2 other areas, are declared disaster zones. Scientists in Taiwan are warning that the effects of climate change could make people more vulnerable to disease. John Van Trieste explains why.
The number of dengue fever cases Taiwan's recorded this year has just broken 6,000, making it the worst outbreak since 2015. And if that wasn't bad enough, experts are now saying that as the climate warms, bad outbreaks of dengue may become more regular and more widespread. That's because one of the most prolific spreaders of dengue, the yellow fever mosquito, thrives in hot conditions.
在冬天台湾只有20度左右的时候，它可能要20天、30天才会变成成虫，所以它整个生活只缩短。
These mosquitoes are also likely to spread across a wider area. For now, they're mostly found in the south, where the majority of dengue cases have been reported this year. But as the climate warms, areas further north can also expect to see spikes in dengue outbreaks. And dengue may not be the only condition that could become more common. A fatal case of the so-called brain-eating amoeba caused a recent public health scare. It turned out to be an isolated case, but there are worries these organisms, with their love of warm water, could come into contact with people more frequently in a warmer future. The science is still out on whether this could be true, but some tropical disease experts are still concerned.
因为温度高的时候，人们使用那个水的几率就更高。哈，像譬如说，像娱乐用水，天气热去游泳，那天气热去野溪里头，然后这样子就很容易造成它的接触。你这接触越多。
These scholars warn that when climate change picks up, disease will spread, and places like Taiwan may not be spared. Joseph Wu and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan has released its first shipment of pork in over 20 years. This follows on from the country being declared free of foot and mouth disease in 2020. 22 tons of pork left from Taiwan for the Philippines. Pork exports were halted after a foot and mouth disease outbreak in 1997. The country was recognized as free of the disease in 2020, though export restrictions remained in place. 6 domestic companies have since received permits to export pork to the Philippines. Taiwan's native freshwater fish face both natural and man-made threats, but the loss of their habitats to invasive species may pose the biggest challenge. Now, anglers here are taking these invaders on and trying to give local species a shot at survival. John Van Trieste netted this story.
Armed with rods and nets, these volunteers are trying to undo years of ecological damage. They belong to an association that does regular surveys of the fish in Taiwan's waterways. What they've been finding in the country's lakes and ponds has alarmed them. The fish they're here to protect are disappearing.
天灾的话，也许我们会碰到干旱，也许我们会碰到洪水，它改变了它原来栖地的样貌。它们弱势的最主要的原因还是因为人祸的造成栖地的改变，工程的浩劫。那我们刚刚讲说，土地在私人的土地里面，可能它一夕之间就没有。我们看过好几个这样子的情形。
The worst damage of all, though, comes from invasive species. This lake just outside Taipei is a textbook example of how that happens.
这个地方早期的研究报告都是以清江鱼为主，台湾清江鱼为主。但是经由我们这3年来不间断续的来这里做调查的结果，那目前发现里面的清江鱼已经消失了。目前主要的发现大部分都是后来被放进来的外来鱼种。
It's the same story in many ponds nationwide. That's why these days the group is using its fishing tools for a new purpose. Instead of documenting fish and putting them back, it's out to catch as many invasive fish as it can.
适应力好，抗受性好，繁殖力高，这是外来鱼种会快速称霸台湾水域的一个原因。我们能做的部分就是尽我们所能的去清除它，清一只少一只。
Taiwan's covered in small lakes and ponds, and only has these volunteers to clean them all out. But the size of the task isn't putting off anyone here. They're all determined to make each of Taiwan's ponds a place where native species have the space they need to thrive. Eason Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
With the Olympic and Paralympic Games set to open in Paris next year, some people are worried the city's traditional streets and transportation will leave wheelchair users out of the festivities. Laura Stewart has more.
Traditional architecture, big avenues, and classic cobbled streets. Paris is a city long revered for its charm, but it can be a nightmare for people who use wheelchairs. And difficulty getting around the streets hasn't been made easier by public transport. With the city hosting the Olympic and Paralympic Games next year, many people expected upgrades to metro and bus systems. But for wheelchair users, getting around during the Games is likely to still cause headaches. Parisian Frank Mael tested out a route taking him from the triathlon swimming site to the basketball and gymnastics stadium. Using a wheelchair, what would usually be a 30-minute journey took him over an hour.
aujourd'hui, se déplacer sur Paris en fauteuil roulant, c'est difficile, c'est la galère, et voire impossible parfois.
Officials say that because much of the city was built centuries ago, accessibility was not part of its original design. They also say, because the city's metro was built more than 100 years ago, the games are a good incentive to renovate.
On se dit vraiment que c'est pas une fin, les Jeux paralympiques, l'arrivée des Jeux paralympiques, au contraire, c'est une dynamique qui se met en place. Alors, on le sait, tous les transports publics de Paris aujourd'hui ne seront pas accessibles pour les Jeux olympiques et paralympiques. En revanche,
to prepare for an estimated 6,000 spectators who use wheelchairs in next year's Summer Olympics, 250 refitted buses have been deployed, and the French transport operator says it aims to increase step-free metro access to 14%. But some say this is not enough. About a third of London's underground stations and over 80% of Berlin's have step-free access, and those cities are among the oldest in Europe. Maëlle says the low number seen in Paris is a result of government inaction.
On peut aller sur la Lune, on prévoit d'aller sur Mars, on prévoit plein de choses, la technologie. On n'est pas capable de rendre accessible une ville? Non, c'est de la foutaise.
Following the Olympic principles of excellence, friendship and respect, Paris is preparing to welcome the world next year. But some people who hope to be inspired there fear they might instead end up missing out. Klein Wong and Laurel Stewart for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally today, we'll leave you with images of a fashion exhibition in London, collecting items from UK-based designers over the last 30 years. I'm Yin Khvat. Take care. See you next time.